The Eagles, the last 2 weeks, they got their doors blown off against the 49ers and the Cowboys. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1, no concern in the world, 10, all the concern in the world, where's your concern level at with this Philadelphia Eagles team?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely, all the concern, most certainly at a 10. To start your season off, you get to 9-1, then you get to 10-1, and, you've got complete control over your destiny as far as the division is concerned, as far as the conference is concerned, and in 2 weeks, all of that evaporates away. To say that, the fans, the media, and to a certain extent the team should be concerned with where they are and how they've played the last, 2 games, is an understatement in my opinion.
How do they get this right?
Well, listen, I think that, when you're winning, it's easy to kind of gloss over the things that, it's easy to gloss over your flaws and the things that, the mistakes that you make because you find a way to win. I think that there are some fundamental flaws, with this football team that, in week 14, 15, you're not going to be able to fix those things. They are what they are. Obviously they can play better. They can execute their offense and their defense much better. But I think that there are some fundamental and technical flaws with this football team, that are irreparable at this point in time.
Seth Joyner here with us. What kind of performance do you think you'll see out of Seattle? They play them on Monday when the Eagles go up against Seattle. We know the Seahawks need a win in the worst way, but now for Philadelphia, this is where we're going to find out what they're made out of, because they start to lose 3 in a row, then a lot more people are going to start piling on with this team. So what response do the Eagles have on Monday night?
Well, listen, we thought the same thing after the San Francisco game. Now's the time to find out, what this football team is actually made of, because, the division is now on the line, and your lead in the conference has dwindled to 1 game. That was the time to really show what they were made of. And they came out last night against the Cowboys on national TV and pretty much, laid an egg. I didn't see the effort. I didn't see the urgency, none of that stuff. So now when you lose games like that, you give up 75 points in 2 games total. You're giving up 37.5 points over the last 2 weeks. Other teams, the teams that are left on your schedule that at one point when you were, the talk of the league, now all of a sudden those teams look at you as gettable. So this isn't going to be a cakewalk going into Seattle. The Eagles haven't won in Seattle in a long time. They've never beaten Pete Carroll, as a matter of fact. So now you have to go to Seattle. That game has been flexed to a Monday night game. So now you're out on Front Street again for the world to see. And you're going to face a Seattle team whose backs are against the wall, who now believe, that they can beat you, and they're going to give you their best shot. And now you're going to have to find out whether this football team has got that fight in them, because, from here on out, I mean, even though they got the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Giants, to end the season, if you think that those 2 teams don't think that they can beat the Eagles based upon what they've witnessed the last 2 weeks, then you're crazy. Because they believe now that, hey, we can get a win against, what used to be the elite team in the National Football League.
How do you think, Seth, that we're talking about this team at the end of the season? Like right now, okay, the last 2 weeks have been brutal. As you said, it's tough to turn it around and correct some of these issues this late in the season. But how do you see the rest of the season playing out? Like what round do you think this team is heading towards in the playoffs?
Well, listen, I mean, with a snap of a finger in 2 weeks, they've gone from the number 1 seed to the number 5 seed, and they've got a 1-game lead on the Cowboys on the division. So obviously, another loss could spell absolute doom for them. Mm-hmm. From not only a divisional standpoint, but also from the conference standpoint. They've just got to execute better. They've got to play with more of a sense of urgency as to where they are and, what needs to happen. They need to coach better. The offense and the defense needs to, have a lot more creativity to it. And I believe that, they need to embody a much more aggressive posture from the standpoint of how they play defense. Because the bend but don't break methodology can only carry you so far. At some point in time in every single game, you have to. It requires you to play aggressive, and that's not only from a front and a linebacker standpoint, but that's from a secondary standpoint, and that's not their nature. That's not what they want to be. They want to prevent the big explosive plays, and they want to create explosive plays on the other side of the ball. Conversely, it takes the same thing. You can't expect to get the explosive plays if you don't run the football well and you're not setting up, the right and the opportunity to get explosive plays down the field. Teams are just not going to give you that. So, there are some things that they have to change, and there's some things that they have to, do better. Just based upon what, I've seen the last 2 weeks, it's hard for me to believe that they can right the ship, but, that's why they play the game on Sunday. We'll see what they're made of.
Seth Joyner here with us. The last 2 years, we all knew what the Cowboys were. They could win a bunch of games in the regular season, but when push comes to shove, they don't get the job done in the postseason against the better teams. When you look at Dallas, that was a big statement that they made last night up against the Eagles. How far are you willing to go in terms of what the Cowboys can accomplish this year?
Well, until they prove that they can get it done when it really, really counts. It's still a regular season game, and the Eagles still hold the tiebreaker over them for the division. So while, yes, it's a statement game for them to prove that, hey, they can take a step in that direction, at the end of the day, they've got, they got to go to Buffalo. They got to go to Miami. I'm trying to think. They've got one more tough game at home before they finish up with Washington, which is always, no matter how bad Washington is, that's always a dogfight for them. So until they can prove that, they can run the table and get in the playoffs and win a game when it really matters most in the playoffs, they're still the Dallas Cowboys, and I look for them at some point to falter like they have, the last 10 years.
Yeah. You know what? It's crazy, and I think we're on the same page here. I call them the drama Dallas choking Cowboys, and I know that you'll never root for the Cowboys. This team, though, is very likable this year. They're like, you take the Philly stuff out of it, they are an easy team to watch when you see them play football.
Well, listen, Dak's playing well. Ever since they lost to, the Eagles in the first game, he's been playing lights out. There's no doubt about it. I think the guy's got 24 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I'm not beyond giving credit where credit is due. Defensively, they're extremely opportunistic, but I've seen teams be able to run the football on them, and when I think you can commit to running the football on that defense, that opens up your ability to pass the ball, which the Eagles did not do last night. And, then you have an opportunity, to be successful against them. Listen, I wouldn't take anything away from them. They had their rough patch, like any other team throughout the years had their rough patch. The Eagles are in their rough patch right now after, such a great start. But, my football eye still tells me, we'll see. I see, the Eagles are struggling to find their footing again. I see the San Francisco 49ers hitting their stride. I see, the Dallas Cowboys with a quarterback who's playing efficiently and a defense, who is very opportunistic, especially if you give them, a lead. But, down the stretch, everybody's got to prove who and what they are. They got to win the games that they got to win. And when you get into the postseason, that's where the rubber really meets the road. So we'll see.
Seth Joyner, right now, with Week 14 wrapping up tonight as we have a doubleheader on Monday Night Football, who would you say the MVP is of the NFL this season?
I really haven't seen a quarterback that's torn it up all season long. I think what Tyreek Hill is doing is just ridiculous. And I think if he reaches 2,000 yards receiving,
he should get
the
it.
amount of touchdowns that he's putting up, if I had a vote, I'd vote him the MVP.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I just have zero confidence that the voters will do that because this now seems like a quarterback award, and we haven't seen a non-quarterback win it since 2012, and there's never been a wide receiver, unfortunately, that has won it. I just don't trust the voters to give it to Tyreek Hill because some will then say, oh, Tua should get it on his own team, even though I agree with your analysis.
Well, listen, You can make that argument for Tua, but when you see a quarterback throw the ball, Brock Purdy falls into that same arena. When you see a quarterback throwing balls 15, to 20 yards downfield and your wide receivers turn them into 75, 80 yards touchdowns, you also got to give some credit to the guys, just getting those yak yards and those yards after contact as well. So to your point, yeah, you're right. It's traditionally a quarterback-driven award, but I think the circumstances are extenuating this year because you look at Patrick Mahomes, he doesn't look like, a MVP quarterback this year, even as great as he is. And all the other quarterbacks have had their games where they've looked like MVPs and then turned around and played like non-MVPs. The one constant that you've seen all season long is Tyreek Hill has just terrorized secondaries all season long, and that's been consistent.
Last thing I'll ask you, Seth Joyner. The Chiefs did a lot of complaining yesterday after there was an obvious call by the officials. Kadarius Toney was clearly lined up offside. How have you reacted to all the complaining that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes did after that one yesterday?
Listen, I understand why they're complaining, but, you need to shut it down and stop it. You won a Super Bowl, last year off a questionable call because it could have easily been that, you could have let that holding call on Juju Smith-Schuster by James Bradbury, you could have let that go. That referee knew the minute that he threw that flag that the Super Bowl, for all intents and purposes, was over, I should say. If you don't throw that flag or you pick that flag up, then Kansas City has to kick a field goal. The game is tied. Now Jalen Hurts has the ball with 1 minute and 50 seconds and 2 timeouts left to go down and see what he can do as far as having the Eagles having the chance to win that game. But the flag was the flag. Flag was thrown. The Eagles didn't complain about it. None of their coaches or players complained about it. So these guys need to stop complaining about the fact that the referees cost them a game. One play doesn't determine the game, especially a little Hail Mary, pass that you throw. There's some things that happen to put you in a situation where you need to do that. Maybe you need to address that rather than worrying about what the referees are doing, because every team in the National Football in time during the season could definitely complain about the calls by the referee and opportunities to win or lose football games because he's throwing